I used to believe that Christmas was the one time of year when every heart turned toward family. No matter how busy, no matter the arguments, no matter how far apart we'd been all year. On Christmas Eve, everyone would come home. But that year, at 70 years old, I learned a harsh lesson that belief can be shattered with a single phone call. That night, instead of laughter clinking glasses and the smell of roast turkey filling the house, I had a one-person dinner, and the entire room echoed with silence. My family didn't just leave me alone on Christmas Eve. They did something far worse. They took the very savings I'd spent my whole life putting aside the money I thought would be used to fix the roof, or keep for the days when my health might fail, and spent it on a warm Caribbean cruise, a 15-day trip. All of them together, without me. No phone call to ask, no invitation. You might think surely they felt guilty when they got back, but you'd be wrong. They returned with sun-kissed skin, bright smiles, and the assumption that nothing had changed, that I would open the door, set the table, and laugh it all off. But no, this time I was different. Before they could step through the worn front door of the family home, before they could casually walk into the living room that had held decades of memories, I had done something that stopped them cold. I had sold everything. The house my husband and I had built over 40 years, the place they grew up in where the family photos once hung, was no longer ours. The lakeside cabin where we fished and grilled every summer now belonged to a newlywed couple. The empty lot my husband always dreamed of turning into a vacation home also sold. They had nowhere to come back to. No mom's house waiting with the door unlocked. No dining table for 12. No rocking chair where my granddaughter once fell asleep on my shoulder. When Robert, my eldest, called in a panic, standing outside with his whole family and their luggage piled on the curb, I took a slow sip of hot coffee sitting on the balcony of my new apartment and calmly said, "Yes, I sold it all. The main house, the lake cabin, the lot. Your belongings are in storage for 3 months. After that, they're yours to deal with." There was a long silence, long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Then came the shouting, the accusations, the flood of questions. Why would you do that? Why didn't you tell us? Where will you live? Why would you take away our home? I just gave a small laugh. You say your home. But sweetheart, that was my home. My name was on the deed, and I have the right to decide its fate. That was the moment I realized for years I had let them believe I would always be here, keeping the house, keeping the traditions, keeping everything just so they could live their own lives without a second thought. But they had forgotten that I am not just mom. I am a person with feelings, self-respect, and the right to choose. That Christmas Eve, I ate alone, watching the snow fall outside my window, and I made myself a promise I would never let myself be treated as an afterthought again. When they left me behind, they thought they were only taking away one holiday dinner. What they didn't know was that they gave me a reason to take back everything and let go of everything. And that's exactly what I did. Now I live in a small apartment. I chose myself, with a balcony overlooking the lake where ducks drift lazily each morning. No more noisy footsteps, no more cooking for people who treat my sacrifices as routine. No more holding on to a big empty house just to wait for rare, half-hearted visits. I know to some it might seem like an extreme decision. But if you heard my whole story, from the years I raised 3 children on my own to the moment I discovered they were planning to put me in a nursing home, you'd understand why I don't regret a thing. And if you ever found yourself in my position, maybe you'd do the same. So, how did it all begin? Let me start from the very beginning. That Christmas morning started just like every other Christmas I'd had for more than 20 years, ever since my husband Frank passed away. My little house in the suburbs was bathed in warm, golden light, streaming through snowflake-patterned window clings. Outside, a fine powder of snow coated the white picket fence. Inside, the scent of cinnamon and apples from the pie baking in the oven mingled with the piney aroma of the Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. I stood in the kitchen oven mitts, still on placing the final name card on the dining table, with a smile. I'd handwritten each one with my old fountain pen, curling the letters the way I'd practiced back in school. I didn't just write names next to each card. I tied a small sprig of pine with a red ribbon, because I wanted everyone to feel that this meal was more than food. It was a moment to be cherished. The long dining table was dressed in the hand-embroidered tablecloth my mother had passed down to me, a family heirloom I've always guarded carefully. In the center sat an arrangement I'd made the night before, fresh pine branches, clusters of red berries, and pillar candles, each placed with care. Every chair was perfectly aligned, and the chandelier's light made the crystal glasses shimmer like they'd been dusted with gold. Dinner this year was meant for 12 my 3 children, Robert, Lisa, and Michael with their spouses, my 5 grandkids and me. All the familiar faces I'd been looking forward to seeing for weeks. From the kitchen, I could hear soft Christmas music coming from my old radio, a Bing Crosby recording of White Christmas, the same one Frank and I used to play whenever we decorated the tree. I glanced toward the living room. The Christmas tree stood nearly to the ceiling, dressed with ornaments collected over decades. There was the crystal ball from our trip to Colorado, the wooden angel Lisa painted in 5th grade, and even the worn knit stocking Frank had hung that very first Christmas we spent together. Under the tree, the presents were neatly wrapped, each tagged with a name. I'd chosen every gift with care, an oversized Lego set for little Jack, my youngest grandson, who loves building. A cream-colored scarf for Patricia Roberts' wife because I remembered her saying, "This winter felt colder than usual." A special edition comic book for Emma, my oldest granddaughter, which I'd ordered from a shop in another state. Each gift was wrapped in red or green paper, tied with a large bow, and adorned with a sprig of pine, my own small Christmas wish to each of them. In the oven, the herb-seasoned turkey was turning a rich golden brown, its juices sizzling into the roasting pan, filling the house with a savory sweetness. On the stovetop, a pot of fluffy mashed potatoes sat beside a dish of green beans, topped with crispy onions and stuffing made with bread celery, and onions all bound together with the aroma of melted butter. On the counter, 2 pies, 1 apple, 1 pumpkin, were cooling their buttery crusts, giving off a warm, sweet scent. Everything was ready early, because I wanted my children and grandchildren to walk in and feel with every sense, smell, sight, touch, that this was home, a place that welcomed them. I glanced at the wall clock. 2:30 in the afternoon. The family would arrive at 4, just like every year. I still had plenty of time to shower and put on my new deep green dress, soft fabric, gently fitted, flattering even at my age. I'd saved it for a special day like today. In my mind, I pictured the evening, Robert helping me carve the turkey, Lisa bringing out the pies, Michael laughing loudly as he told a story from work. The kids would be darting around the tree, tearing open presents. The voices, the laughter, the music, the twinkling lights, the mouth-watering smells. It was the kind of scene I'd treasured and preserved through so many winters. Christmases in the past hadn't always been perfect. Someone might be late because of traffic, a child might spill a drink on the tablecloth, but I loved every moment. To me, it was proof that no matter how life changed, we still had each other. As I started up the stairs to change, I paused and looked back at the table one more time. Everything was perfect, so perfect, I told myself Frank would be smiling if he could see it. I took a deep breath, savoring the peace before the joy of company filled the house. What I didn't know was that in just a few minutes, a single phone call would make all of this preparation meaningless, and the warm Christmas I had been longing for would turn into the coldest night of my life. I had just stepped onto the first stair to head up and change when the sound of an incoming message chimed from my phone on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it, figured I'd check later, but then the screen lit up and I saw the name Robert, my oldest son. My heart warmed a little. Maybe he was calling to ask if he should bring an extra bottle of wine, or to see if Emma could sleep in the room with the old rocking chair she loved. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up my voice cheerful. "Hello, sweetheart." But the second I heard his "Hey, Mom," I knew something was wrong. His voice was dry, rushed, missing its usual warmth. "Listen. There's been a slight change of plans." My hand tightened around the phone. "Change of plans. What do you mean? Don't tell me we won't be coming for Christmas dinner tonight." He rushed the words out like if he stopped for a breath I'd cut in. "Actually, no one's coming." The whole family decided to do something different this year. I froze, bracing myself against the edge of the counter to keep steady. "Different? I don't understand." "We're already on a cruise, Mom. Everyone. Me and Patricia, Lisa, and David, Michael, and Jennifer, and the kids. 15 days in the Caribbean. Lisa found a great deal, so we just went ahead and booked it." A cruise. At Christmas, I repeated as if saying it aloud might help me make sense of it. But I've been preparing since yesterday. The turkey, the pies, the gifts. I know, Mom, but this came together so fast. And, well, you don't even like the ocean. You always get seasick. If you'd told me ahead of time, I could have brought motion sickness pills. I could have gone with you. There was a short pause on the other end before Robert spoke again, his voice careful, almost too gentle. Actually, we only booked enough rooms for the immediate family. Immediate family. Those two words slammed into me like a door closing. For years, I thought immediate family included me, the woman who brought them into this world, raised them, sacrificed for them. But in their minds right now, I was just an extension, not part of the core anymore. When did you leave? I asked, forcing my voice to stay even. This morning. We're already out at sea. Anyway, Mom, I've got to go. They're doing the welcome ceremony on the main deck. Merry Christmas, okay? We'll call when we're back. Before I could answer, the line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, motionless. The Christmas music drifting from the radio suddenly sounded distant and mocking. The lavishly set table, the food in the oven, the twinkling tree, everything felt hollow in an instant. A coldness crept through me, not from the winter air outside, but from the gaping emptiness that had just opened inside my chest. Slowly, I reached for my purse, pulled out my reading glasses and bank card, and sat at the table. I opened my banking app without really knowing why, just a gut feeling. And then my heart stopped. 3 days ago, there had been a withdrawal of $1,280 from my savings account. The note in the transaction read clearly, Royal Caribbean Cruises. I read it again, and again. It was the money I'd scraped together over years, saving what was left after bills, skipping new dresses for myself, all to keep a safety cushion for my later years. No one asked me. No one got my permission. They used my money to take themselves on vacation and leave me here alone. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. The golden kitchen light was still warm, but now it felt harsh, almost cruel. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes kissing the glass before melting away. I stared at them, hollow inside. The turkey still turned in the oven, the timer set to ding in less than an hour. The mashed potatoes were done, the green beans ready. 2 pies, apple and pumpkin, rested on the counter, their sweet fragrance meant to mingle with laughter and conversation. Instead, all I could hear was the tick, tick, tick of the wall clock, each second stretching endlessly. I walked slowly into the living room. The tree still stood tall, glowing with lights dressed in ornaments, each with a story of its own. Underneath the wrapped gifts sat untouched, silent promises never to be opened. I sank into the armchair, scanning the room, and realized I had never felt more out of place in my own home. Christmas. The holiday I'd held sacred my entire life had just been stripped of its warmth. And worse, it wasn't just absence that had ruined it. It was betrayal. I don't know when the tears started falling, but when I wiped them away, a new thought began to take shape, quiet, but firm. This would be the last year I let myself be treated this way. I sat silently in the armchair, watching the Christmas lights cast soft, shimmering patterns across the walls. And in that moment, my mind drifted back through the decades to the years when I had wrapped my entire life around my 3 children. I met Frank in my early 20s. He was a young Navy sailor, his smile as bright as a May morning. We married when I was 24, brimming with dreams of a warm home and children running through the yard. But just 6 years later, that dream shattered. A sudden heart attack took Frank from me when he was only 34. The day he died, Robert was 5, Lisa 3, and Michael just 18 months old. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Overnight, I became both mother and sole provider. Frank's life insurance nearly paid off the mortgage, but raising 3 kids in America in the late 70s was anything but easy. By day, I worked as a secretary in a law office. By night, I waited tables at a local diner. On winter evenings when the snow piled thick, I'd come home late, my fingers numb from the cold, slipping quietly into the kids' room while they slept. I'd remind myself I'm doing this so they'll always have a home, so they'll never have to worry about food or clothes. Some Christmas Eves, while the whole town was celebrating, I'd still be behind the counter pouring coffee for customers trying to earn a few extra dollars in tips. And when I finally got home, I'd stay up into the night wrapping gifts, savoring the quiet joy of knowing that in the morning their eyes would light up when they tore through the paper. I remember the day Robert graduated high school. He stood on that stage grinning, holding the keys to the old used car I had spent 6 months saving for. I kept driving my own beat-up car, the one that broke down on the freeway 2 years later, so he could have reliable transportation to community college. I never regretted it for a second. Then there was Lisa, the little girl who had always dreamed of living in New York. When her acceptance letter from NYU came along with a partial scholarship, she cried tears of joy. But the remaining tuition was still a huge amount. Quietly, I refinanced the house, hiding the financial strain so she wouldn't have to worry. The day she graduated and landed a job in Manhattan, I felt as proud as if her success were my own. And Michael, my youngest, my spirited, sometimes troublesome boy. There was a time he fell in with the wrong crowd and got picked up by the police for possession of a small amount of marijuana. I hired a lawyer and paid $3,000 in legal fees, all on my credit card, taking years to pay off. But I believed that if I didn't step in, he might lose his future. Beyond the big sacrifices, there were countless small ones I never spoke of. The winters I wore the same old coat so they could have new clothes. The summers I worked extra shifts instead of taking time off just so I could save for a family trip. The birthday cakes I baked at 2 a.m. because I couldn't afford to order one, but still wanted them to have exactly what they wished for. I kept every little piece of our family's history. Robert's Little League photo, the letter Lisa sent from New York, the guitar Michael once played every summer evening before abandoning it in the attic. All of it tucked away in boxes upstairs. Frank used to say, "We're building all this for the family so the kids will always have a place to come home to." And I lived by that, making this house their anchor for more than 40 years. But tonight, sitting here in the glow of the Christmas tree, I realized that this place to come home to mattered only to me now. To them, it had become a convenient location and part of their future inheritance. And tonight, while they enjoyed a luxury vacation paid for with my money, I understood that my decades of sacrifice had been taken for granted. I had always believed a mother's love was unconditional. But unconditional love doesn't mean allowing others to trample on your dignity. Looking back at all those years, 2 jobs, unpaid bills, sleepless nights, I don't regret what I did. I only regret letting them believe I would always be here, keeping everything the same, accepting whatever treatment they chose to give me. Now, for the first time in decades, I felt something else rising in me, resolve. If Frank were still here, I know he wouldn't want me to be overlooked like this. He would want me to stand up and protect the life I had left. And maybe it was finally time to do just that. That Christmas Eve, after I tucked away the untouched dishes into the fridge, I couldn't sleep. The bedroom that had once been my place of comfort now felt too big, too cold. I tossed and turned, listening to the wind whistle outside the window, feeling an emptiness settle deep inside me. Finally, I turned on the lamp, pulled on a cardigan, and climbed up to the attic. There, inside the old cedar chest, I kept the most important keepsakes of my life: photographs, letters, and property deeds. I opened each folder one by one. Here was the deed to the main house, the place I had lived in for more than 45 years. Here were the papers for the little lake house where Frank used to teach the kids how to fish. And here was the deed to the vacant lot Frank had inherited from his father. Every single one was in my name. Frank had made sure of that before he passed to protect me and the children. As I searched for the last set of documents, something else slipped into my hand: a glossy brochure for Sunny Pines Assisted Living, a well-known nursing facility in the area. In the top right corner, in handwriting I recognized instantly Robert's handwriting, were some scrawled notes. "Talk to Mom after the trip. Sell house split evenly." I sank into the old attic chair, my heart pounding, part hurt, part anger. So the vacation was just the warm-up. When they got back, they planned to put me in a nursing home and sell everything. In their eyes, I wasn't a mother to be respected. I was a responsibility to be neatly handled so the assets could be divided without fuss. I clenched the paper in my hand. In that moment, the sharp sting of pain began to dissolve, replaced by a cold, steady clarity. I had spent my life protecting these properties for my family, but to them, they were nothing more than dollar signs in a bank account. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I carried all the documents down to the small office next to the kitchen. Sitting at the desk, I pulled out my old address book and found the name Lawrence Winters Frank's best friend from college, now a real estate attorney. We still sent each other Christmas cards every year and occasionally spoke on the phone. I dialed. After just 2 rings, his warm but surprised voice came through Edna. "It's been ages since I heard your voice. Is everything all right?" I took a deep breath. "Lawrence, I need legal advice. Right away." He was silent for a few seconds, as if sensing the weight in my voice. "Do you want to come by my office tomorrow? I'll make room in my schedule." The next morning, I put on my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to Lisa's college graduation, and fastened the pearl necklace Frank had given me on our 5th wedding anniversary. I wanted to look composed, strong, not like a woman who had just spent the night alone burning with betrayal. Lawrence's office was in a restored old house in the middle of town. He greeted me with a firm handshake and concerned eyes. Once we sat down, I told him everything from the canceled Christmas dinner and the missing $1,280 to the nursing home brochure with Robert's notes. Lawrence listened without interrupting, jotting down the occasional note. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Edna, this is clearly elder financial abuse. You could sue." I shook my head. "I'm not ready to drag this into court. I want something cleaner. Final. I want to sell everything, the main house, the lake house, the lot, before they get back." His eyebrows rose. "Everything. Even the home you live in. Especially that one. They don't see it as home anymore, just a piece of property to carve up. I want to cut that idea off completely." Lawrence was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Everything's in your name. Legally, you have full authority. If we price them right, I can connect you with quick buyers." "But have you thought about where you'll live?" I have. "I want a small apartment near the park with a balcony overlooking the Lake Park View condominiums. I've had my eye on it for a while." We got to work immediately. Lawrence would reach out to realtors that same day. The listings would go live within a week. I would only take what I truly needed. Everything else would go into storage prepaid for 3 months, and then it would be their problem. When I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. For decades, every decision I made revolved around preserving the family home for my children. For the first time, I was making a decision purely for myself. That night, I came home, pulled a blank sheet of paper from the desk drawer, and wrote a single sentence: "From this day on, I live my life my way." I taped it to the refrigerator right next to an old photo of Frank smiling, and in his eyes, I thought I saw a quiet approval. I knew I was stepping into a silent war, but this time I was the one taking the first shot. And more importantly, I was no longer the woman waiting for her children to decide her fate. The days after my meeting with Lawrence passed as quickly as a winter wind. True to his word, he introduced me to Mary Ellison, a well-known real estate agent in the area with a reputation for selling faster than lightning. Mary showed up at my door the next morning in a red wool coat carrying a thick notebook. "Mrs. Warren," she said, "I've reviewed your file. All 3 of your properties are rare finds. If we price them right, we could close in a matter of weeks, maybe even days." I led Mary through each room of the main house. She took notes as she walked, her eyes lighting up at the spacious kitchen, the backyard with its row of old oak trees, and the living room with its massive stone fireplace. "This house will draw buyers like bees to honey," Mary said confidently. "In this market, young families will compete for it." I smiled faintly. Good. The faster, the better. Just 3 days after the listings went live, the lake house already had a buyer, a young newlywed couple looking for a weekend getaway. They paid in cash, which meant the paperwork would be processed lightning fast. From the living room window, I saw them holding hands, gazing at the mist-covered lake, and I felt a quiet sense of relief. This place deserved someone who would cherish it. Next came the vacant lot. Lawrence called me one afternoon with the news a developer has been waiting to buy that piece of land for years. "They accepted your asking price immediately. In just a week, 2 properties were gone, bringing in enough to buy my new apartment and still have a comfortable safety net." The main house was the hardest part. I had lived there for nearly half a century. Every corner, every scratch in the hardwood floors held memories, but I refused to let sentiment slow my plan. Mary organized an open house, and I stayed away during the showing so I wouldn't be tempted to linger. When I returned, she told me, "There are 3 families ready to make offers, but I think you'll like this one best." It was a young couple with 3 small children. The wife teared up as she stepped into the backyard. I can already picture the kids playing under that tree. I nodded. Yes, this was a place for new memories to be made. I signed the sale papers that same week, packing up and letting go of the past. Once the paperwork was nearly complete, I hired a moving company. The foreman, a man about the same age as my son, asked, "Do you want us to pack up this big dining table? It's worth quite a bit." I looked at the cherrywood table, the one that had once been the center of Christmas dinners for the whole family. But the image that came to mind wasn't a joyful gathering. It was last Christmas, with the table piled high with food, and only one seat filled mine. "No," I said. "The buyers want it. Leave it here." I kept only the things I truly needed, and that held personal value: my bed, my favorite armchair, Frank's desk, a few framed family photos from when the kids were young, and the tea set I used every morning. Everything else, the kids' belongings from old school books and high school mementos, to the furniture they had left for storage at my place, I had packed separately. I rented a storage unit near town, prepaid for 3 months, and labeled each box with the owner's name and a note: "Storage expires on date." I left nothing behind in the house for them to come pick up as if it were still Mom's home. When my children returned, the only thing they would find was a house with new owners and the address to a storage unit. The new home and the feeling of freedom. The day I received the keys to my apartment at Parkview Condominiums, I felt as if I'd stepped into an entirely new chapter. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, with a balcony that looked out over a small lake where ducks floated lazily. The living room was just big enough for my armchair, a bookshelf, and the television. The kitchen was small but bright, with a window facing east to catch the morning sun. It took me a few days to arrange everything exactly the way I wanted, not the way my kids preferred, not to keep things as they've always been for their sake, but entirely for me. On the walls hung paintings I'd admired for years, but never bought because they wouldn't fit the old house. In the kitchen, every tool and dish was neatly arranged, perfectly suited for one person who actually enjoys cooking. On my first morning there, I brewed a cup of coffee, carried it out to the balcony, and sat in my new chair watching the sunlight turn the water gold. No hurried footsteps, no mental checklist of tasks for other people, just me and a peaceful stillness, preparing for their return. All the sales and transfers were finalized just a few days before my children were scheduled to return from their cruise. Lawrence called to confirm everything's done. "The money's in your account. It's all legal. No one has the right to interfere." I thanked him, then sat down at my little kitchen table and wrote out a note with the storage unit's address, lot code, and a short message: "Fees paid until date." "After that, it's up to you." I slipped it into an envelope and placed it next to the phone. Looking around my new apartment, I realized everything was ready. Not just the home, but the message it sent: I had reclaimed the right to decide my own life. Last Christmas had been a wound, but it was also the push I needed to understand that I didn't need to tie myself to a house or to possessions that others took for granted. Now, when they came back, I wouldn't argue or give long explanations. I'd simply tell them the truth. It's done. Take care of your own things. And then I'd go back to my morning coffee, my sunlit balcony, and the quiet lake with its ducks, a small, peaceful life that was entirely my own. That morning, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping a cup of hot coffee, watching an old man scatter breadcrumbs for the ducks on the lake. The air was so peaceful, I almost forgot that in just a few hours a family storm would arrive. At 9:17, my phone lit up with Robert's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, making sure my voice was calm. "Hello." Robert's voice came through urgent and tinged with panic. "Mom, where are you? What's going on?" I took a sip of coffee, answering deliberately, slowly. "I'm at home." "No, no, no. You're not at home." We just drove back, and his voice broke for a second, then came back louder. There's some strange family moving their stuff in. They said they bought the house from you, so they had gone straight to the main house. No call ahead, no check-in. I wasn't surprised. They'd probably planned to drop their luggage, freshen up, and continue treating the house as if it were theirs. That's right, I said evenly. I sold the house. And the lake house. And your father's piece of land. There was a pause on the other end, followed by muffled voices. Then Lisa's voice, high and sharp, broke in. What, you did all that without telling us? Michael's voice came next, low and tight. Where are you going to live? Where are we supposed to stay when we visit? I took a deep breath, keeping my tone steady. I've moved into Parkview condominiums. As for your things, I rented a storage unit near town, paid for 3 months. I'll send you the address and lock code. After that, it's your responsibility. You can't just do that, Robert snapped. This is the family home. This is where we grew up. How could you sell everything without asking us? I set my coffee cup down, still watching the ripples on the lake. Like how you asked me before taking $12 in water from my savings account to go on a cruise. Like how you asked me before planning to put me in a nursing home that stopped them cold. I could hear nothing but the wind through the receiver and the slow, steady beat of my own heart. Finally, Robert stammered, Mom, how did you find out about that? I found the Sunny Pines brochure with your handwriting on it, Robert. Don't tell me that was just a coincidence. Lisa jumped in her pitch even higher now. You're overreacting. We were just researching options for the future. You're not young anymore. We were just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. I cut her off, my voice turning cold. Thinking ahead means discussing my future without me present. Thinking ahead means deciding to sell my house as if it already belonged to you. Michael tried to interject. We never said we wanted you dead so we could get the property, Mom. Don't make it sound like that. I let out a short, humorless laugh, not from amusement, but from bitterness. You didn't have to say it. Your actions spoke loudly enough. Robert's voice softened, trying to sound reasonable. Mom, you're acting on impulse. We can sit down, talk this through, find a solution. Selling everything like this? It's extreme. No, Robert. What's extreme is leaving me alone on Christmas Eve, using my money for your vacation, and then planning to put me in a nursing home. What's extreme is treating me like an ATM you can open whenever you want. What I've done is protect myself. Lisa lost her composure entirely. What about our memories? The dining table, the bedrooms, Dad's things. How could you sell all of that? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Memories don't live in walls or furniture, Lisa. They live in your heart. If you truly valued your father and what this family once had, you wouldn't have treated me the way you did. Michael's voice came back sharper now. We need somewhere to come back to. You just cut everything off. I looked out at the lake, watching a duckling dive under and leave widening circles in the water. No, Michael. I only cut the rope you've been using to tie me to one role, the keeper of the house, the assets, the traditions, until I had nothing left. I'm still here. I'm just not letting you dictate my life anymore. Robert's tone hardened, each word deliberate. You'll regret this. When you're older and weaker, when you need help, don't expect us to be there. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I've been older and weaker in your eyes for a long time. That's why you've excluded me from the big decisions. And this past Christmas, I already spent it alone. How is that any different from regret? Lisa exhaled sharply through her nose. If you think this is for the best, just wait and see. I nodded, though they couldn't see it. I've waited long enough. From now on, I'll live my life my way. No more cooking for 12 people only to eat alone. No more keeping every room like a museum for you to visit a few times a year. No more letting anyone else decide my life. No more. Silence. Then the flat beep beep of a call ending. I'm not sure if I hung up first or they did. I set the phone down on the table, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight lifting off my shoulders. The storm had come and gone, and I was still standing. Out on the balcony, the lake glittered in the morning sun. The ducks floated along unbothered, as if the world had never known arguments or betrayal. I picked up my coffee, took another warm sip, and allowed myself the smallest of smiles. After that phone call with my children, I turned my phone to silent for 2 whole days. I needed space to breathe, to let my new rhythm of life settle in. The Parkview apartment was quieter than I'd imagined. At night, instead of the sound of cars rushing by like at the old house, I heard the wind threading through the trees and the gentle lap of water against the shore. On the third morning, while I was watering the small pots of plants on my balcony, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find an elderly woman with silver hair cradling a pot of bright red geraniums. "Hello there, I'm Margaret from 4C. I saw you moved in last week and I haven't had the chance to say hello yet." Her smile was warm as she held out the plant. A little surprised, I smiled back. "I'm Edna. Thank you. The flowers are beautiful." We ended up sitting in my kitchen over coffee, the conversation flowing easily. Margaret told me about the resident group here, how they gather each morning in the community room for coffee, and chat or have light yoga in the afternoons, and host a movie night every Friday. She invited me to join them. I've always been an introvert, but after all those months of being left behind, I realized I didn't want to live shut away anymore. The very next day, I carried my favorite ceramic mug into the community room. About 8 people were already gathered around the long table, the smell of freshly roasted coffee filling the air. They welcomed me like I'd been there for years. Arthur, a retired literature professor, Helen, who used to be a nurse, and the Clarks, a couple who loved telling travel stories. Within a few visits, I found myself looking forward to these mornings. I also joined the water aerobics class at the nearby community center. At first, I thought it would just be a gentle way to stay active, but I soon realized it was a place where I laughed more than I had in years. New friends teased each other about clumsy moves, swapped recipes, and made weekend plans to visit the farmers market. Every Tuesday, I volunteered at the local library for the children's story hour. Reading aloud, hearing the kids giggle, and answering their innocent questions softened something inside me. It felt like belonging, but without the heavy obligations I used to carry. My relationship with my children remained strained after our confrontation. After more than 2 weeks of silence, Robert finally texted. We picked up our things from the storage. "Are you doing okay?" I replied. "I'm fine. Thank you." That was it. No accusations, no opening the door to a long conversation. Lisa emailed asking if she could have Grandma's recipe box. I agreed, packed it, and mailed it to her. Michael called about some of his old sports memorabilia. I told him to check the boxes in storage. Our exchanges stayed short, specific, and impersonal. I knew if we engaged too much while the wounds were still fresh, we'd just spiral into more arguments. Instead, I held my boundaries, protecting myself while giving them time to think. My eldest granddaughter, Emma Roberts' daughter, was the first to break through the distance. One day I received a hand-drawn postcard from her, a small Christmas tree with the words, "I miss you. There's no Grandma's house to visit anymore, but I still want to see you." I called her immediately. "Grandma, does your new place really have a view of the lake?" she asked eagerly. "It does. You'll see the ducks gliding by right under the balcony. We set a weekend date." Robert, reluctant, dropped her off and waited in the parking lot. Emma ran in, eyes lighting up when she saw the balcony and the ducks. She helped me bake cookies, then curled up in my armchair to read. When she left, she hugged me tight. Knowing how good this was for both me and the kids, I told my children, "If you'd like to send the grandkids over, I'm happy to have them." They didn't always agree, but over time, all 7 of my grandchildren came by. We cooked fed ducks at the park or sat on the balcony watching the sunset. The most important thing was making sure my grandchildren knew my love for them hadn't changed, no matter what was going on between the adults. 3 months after moving to Parkview, I realized I'd done so many things I never dared before. I took a watercolor painting class on Wednesday nights. I joined Margaret and Arthur's book club where we argued passionately about the classics. I even tried ballroom dancing in the building's hall, laughing so hard when someone stepped on my toes that tears ran down my face. Every morning now begins with brewing coffee, opening the balcony doors, and watching the lake. No alarm clock to wake me early for someone else's breakfast. No pressure to keep things just the way someone else prefers. I also began sorting through old keepsakes. Some photos I framed and hung in my living room. A few small items I sent to my children with a note, "I think you'll appreciate this." The rest I packed away neatly, no longer letting them take up space in my new life. The scars with my children are still there, but I feel less angry now. I've come to understand that part of their behavior came from selfishness and part from being too used to leaning on me. That doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps me let go. By selling the house and ending their dependence, I'd taught them a lesson. Mom is a person too, not just a role in their lives. And the lesson wasn't just for them, it was for me. I learned how to say no without guilt. I learned to put my own needs on equal footing with everyone else's. I learned to enjoy small moments instead of waiting for special occasions that others might ruin. One summer afternoon, I got a message from Lisa Mom. I've been thinking, when you have time, could we have lunch? Just the two of us. I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I knew it was a sign that a door was cracking open. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stepped out onto the balcony, watching the sunset spill gold over the lake. I thought about the road I'd traveled these past 6 months, from a lonely, abandoned woman to someone who had built a new life, found community, and rediscovered joy. And I knew, no matter how I answered Lisa, I would never go back to the old life. I had found a version of myself that was stronger, happier, and most of all, free. 6 months after I left the old house, summer had arrived at Parkview. The lake below my balcony shimmered in the sunlight, and the lavender bushes I planted in early spring now bloomed in rich purple. I decided it was time to meet my children, not to make peace in the old sense, but to speak plainly about the future. I called each one of them. This time I didn't invite the whole family, no spouses, no grandkids, just my 3 children, Robert, Lisa, and Michael. I wanted the conversation to be focused, without anyone stepping in to defend or soften the tension. On the afternoon we agreed to meet, I prepared a simple dinner: roasted chicken with vegetables, fresh salad, and apple pie for dessert, Frank's favorite back in the day. I didn't try to make it into a family feast like before. No embroidered tablecloth, no candlelight. Just a small dining table that seated 4 with the new dishes I'd bought for this apartment, not the old china from the main house. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock. Robert came in first, wearing a plaid shirt, silver streaks showing at his temples. Lisa followed, elegant as ever in a beige dress. Michael arrived last in a polo shirt and khakis, jingling his keys in his hand out of habit. "Hi, Mom," Robert said cautiously. "Mom?" Lisa nodded slightly. "Hey, Mom." Michael offered a strained smile. I invited them in and had them sit around the table. I could see their eyes scanning the apartment as if trying to fit the mom they knew into this new space. No rocking chair, no smell of aged wood, no big living room to wander around in. "This place is different," Lisa remarked. "Yes," I replied, "because this is my home arranged the way I want." We began eating. At first, the conversation stayed in safe territory: Michael's work, Lisa's new project, Robert taking Emma to summer camp. I let them talk, nodding occasionally, not interrupting. But I knew the real moment was coming. When we were nearly done with the main course, I set my fork down and looked at each of them. "Before dessert, I want to have a serious talk. I invited you today not to dig up the past, but so we can understand each other better." Robert shifted in his seat as if bracing himself. Lisa frowned. Michael stayed silent. "For 45 years since your father passed, I've lived for you." I began, my voice steady and deliberate. "I worked 2 jobs. I gave up personal dreams. I kept the house and everything we had so you'd always have a place to come back to." I paused and looked directly at Lisa. "I don't regret doing that, but I do regret letting that sacrifice become something taken for granted instead of something appreciated." Michael took a sip of water, but didn't speak. Robert lowered his eyes. "Last Christmas," I continued, "you left me alone, used my money to take a trip without inviting me. And worse, I found out you had discussed putting me in a nursing home after you got back. That made me realize I was no longer seen as an active member of this family, just a responsibility to be managed." Mom, Robert started, but I raised my hand. "Not yet, Robert. Let me finish." The room was still except for the ticking of the wall clock. "I decided to sell everything: the main house, the lake cabin, the land, not to hurt you, but to protect the rest of my life. I don't want to live in a house just to preserve someone's inheritance, and I don't want to be put in a nursing home simply because it's more convenient for you. I leaned forward, my voice firm. From now on, if we're going to have a relationship, it will be between adults who respect each other. I will no longer be treated as default. Lisa swallowed hard and asked softly, Mom, do you think we don't love you? I shook my head. Love and respect are two different things. You may love me in your own way, but your actions haven't shown respect, and I won't accept that anymore. Michael spoke next, his voice lower than usual. We didn't think much about your feelings. Maybe because you were always there, we just assumed everything revolved around you. Robert looked up and sighed. You're right, Mom. We were wrong. And that Christmas, it shouldn't have happened. I nodded. I'm not asking for apologies or material compensation. What I want are clear boundaries. I am the one who decides on matters concerning my life and property. I will not accept being excluded from important conversations that involve me. If you want me to be part of family occasions, invite me as a welcome guest, not as the person who cooks and serves. I looked at them one by one. If you agree, we can try to rebuild. If not, I'll still live well. But I won't go back to the old way. The table fell silent. I could see them weighing their pride against their desire to reconnect. Finally, Robert gave a small nod. I agree. And, Mom, I'm sorry. Lisa pressed her lips together, then said, I'll try. You're right. We've taken too much for granted. Michael just looked at me, his expression sincere. I want this relationship to be better. I exhaled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Then we start fresh, not to forget, but to do better. The atmosphere softened. We moved on to talking about the grandkids' summer events in town and the apple pie I had just pulled from the oven. The laughter wasn't fully comfortable yet, but it wasn't as strained as it had been at the start. When they left, Lisa hugged me and whispered, I like this place, Mom. It suits you. I smiled, because I chose it for myself. I stood at the door watching them head to their cars, then went back inside and sat alone on the balcony. The sunset turned the lake golden, and the breeze carried the gentle scent of lavender. I knew the wounds hadn't fully healed, but I also knew one thing for certain. I had reclaimed my voice, my freedom, and my self-respect. And from now on, any relationship I kept would be one worth keeping. That night, after my children left, I sat alone out on the balcony. The warm yellow light from my apartment spilled into the night, mingling with the moonlight shimmering on the surface of the lake. I folded my arms, feeling the cool breeze weave through my hair. Inside me, there was no longer the boiling anger of 6 months ago, no heaviness of abandonment or betrayal pressing down on my shoulders. Instead, there was a rare kind of peace, the kind that only comes when you know you're living a life you've chosen for yourself. I thought back to each stage I'd been through, the lonely Christmas Eve at an empty dining table. The shock of discovering my savings had been drained to pay for their cruise. The nursing home brochure with handwriting I knew too well, like a knife to the heart. And the decisive moment selling everything and walking away from the home I had guarded all my life. Each of those moments felt like they could break me, but they became the bricks I laid to build a new life, smaller, simpler, but entirely my own. Freedom, the gift I gave myself. For the first time in decades, I wasn't tied to a giant house that needed constant care. I wasn't haunted by the idea of keeping everything the same so the kids feel comfortable, and I wasn't weighed down by the fear of upsetting someone. My freedom didn't come from traveling the world or spending lavishly. It came from simple things, waking up when I wanted, eating whatever I felt like for lunch, spending an afternoon reading under a tree without worrying someone would call me into the kitchen. Most of all, I was free from imposed expectations, the expectation that I would always sacrifice without being asked, the expectation that I would let others decide my future for me. Control. I'm in the driver's seat, I used to think. Just let the kids handle it, and sometimes even told myself that it was a relief. But the truth is, when you let someone else drive your life, they can take you anywhere, even to places you never wanted to go. Now I hold the keys. I decide where I live, who I spend my time with, and what I do with my money. I've set clear boundaries. If someone wants to be in my life, they have to respect those terms. Control isn't about being rigid, it's about knowing what truly matters to you and refusing to let it be eroded by someone else's will. Self-respect, the foundation of every relationship. There's a saying I love: people treat you the way you allow them to. This past year, I realized I had allowed disregard to creep into my family relationships simply because I thought, well, they're my kids. But blood is not a free pass to dismiss someone's feelings or rights. When I set new boundaries at first, there was pushback, anger, resistance. But in time, those who truly wanted to stay in my life learned to adjust. Self-respect didn't just protect me, it filtered my relationships, leaving only the ones worth keeping. The new days. These days, I still have my morning coffee on the balcony, watching the lake change colors with the seasons. I still take watercolor classes, still read with my new friends, still spend time with my grandchildren. I don't always think about the past, but when I do, it no longer hurts. Instead, I feel grateful that I had the courage to say no, the resolve to change, and the patience to rebuild. A message for you. Maybe you're hearing my story and recognizing pieces of yourself. Someone who always puts others first, stays silent to avoid conflict, and believes they'll understand without ever speaking up. But the truth is, if you don't stand up for yourself, no one can do it for you. And sometimes change takes one decisive act, an act that may shock anger or drive others away, but one that saves you. Freedom, control, and self-respect. These aren't gifts handed to you by others. They're things you must claim for yourself. So now I want to ask you, if you found yourself in my shoes, dismissed, excluded from major decisions about your own life, would you have the courage to say no more? Would you be willing to sell, walk away, or cut ties with what's holding you back in exchange for peace and ownership of your life? And if you've done it before, what was the moment that made you realize, this is when I have to change? Share your story or your thoughts. Because who knows, your experience might be the push someone else needs to finally step out of the endless loop of unconditional sacrifice. I set my coffee cup down and looked at the lake bathed in the golden glow of sunset. In my heart, I knew I wasn't just closing a chapter, I was beginning a new one. A chapter where every page would be written by my own hand. And I will never again let anyone else hold the pen.